Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. If ever a name was synonymous with an institution, it would be Tony Severino in Rockhurst High School. He has been there for almost 40 years, just retiring after last football season, won 7 state football titles there, won a state football title at Shawnee Mission Northwest before that, making him the only person to win state titles on both sides of the state line, Kansas and Missouri. Heck, you can even throw in the fact that he won a state baseball championship as a coach at Shawnee Mission West as he started their baseball program and won a state championship there. A native of Ohio, he came to Kansas State to play football. He met his wife there, almost returned to Ohio to start his coaching career, but eventually remained here and eventually became the iconic coach at Rockhurst, turning them into a household name as far as football is concerned. He did it with a steady hand and consistency, running the football, stopping the run, but always gaining the respect and admiration of his fellow coaches for his friendly nature, despite his indeed incredibly passionate and competitive nature as well. He's a delightful guy to talk to. He tells many great stories. He's proud of all the players that he's coached. That is the thing that's most near and dear to him. He coached his 3 sons. That's very near and dear to him as well. He often had opportunities to leave Rockhurst, but stayed around and eventually put in almost 40 years at that state line institution. Up next, it's Tony Severino, the iconic Rockhurst football coach, on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices. And we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days, as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the pure gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML 830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson and Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Tony, you were born in Cleveland and lived there for about 5 years, but moved on up the shoreline a little bit to Euclid, Ohio, a connected suburb. What was life like for young Tony Severino in Euclid, Ohio?
Well, it was my folks were terrific people, and I was myself. I was the oldest son. I have an older sister and two younger brothers, and we were just. My dad was worked at a steel fabricating plant. They had a 10th grade education, fought in the war, and my mom was a homemaker, and it was. And my sister and I went to Catholic grade school, and then I went on to got a scholarship to go to Catholic high school in the middle of the city. So, it was just a normal upbringing, played all the sports, and, my love for football began, I think, with about the first grade when my neighbor across the street used to coach the CYO team, and I used to hitch a ride to him to practice. I lived about not quite a mile from my grade school, and so I would go there to practice with him from the time I was in the first grade.
What were the other sports that you played? People then just played all of them pretty much by the season, but what'd you do in other sports?
Well, I was played for football, basketball, and baseball, and it was interesting because I was an all-city basketball player, and when I was in high school, and I had a couple of looks for some tryouts as a baseball player. Basketball and baseball were probably the sports I excelled at the most, just because of my size. But then as I got older, and football became the one I knew I was going to get recruited in, and but I played them all. And back then, you went from one sport to the other, and never knew an off season.
Did you, when I talk to many, I mean many professional athletes, they often like another sport than the one that they actually became most proficient in. Did you like football the most, or did you like all of them?
Well, I liked them all. And, like I said, it was a matter of the season and kind of year to year as I went. As growing up, I was probably more proficient in baseball. And then when I got into about middle of my grade school years, I really started doing a lot of basketball, and I played CYO basketball, CYO football, and so then basketball became a real love of mine. And but I always knew I was going to be a football player, and because I was playing quarterback then, I got basically Cathedral Latin was my high school. It was run by the Marianists, and it's an all-boys Marianist school with 1,200 boys, and it sat right in the middle of the downtown, almost downtown Cleveland. It was kind of in the cultural district, just outside of the district. But I used to take 3 modes of transportation to get there, and but it was well worth it.
So how would you describe maybe a life as a teenager in Euclid? Now, obviously, you're spending a lot of time commuting back and forth to school, but what was life like in that town?
Oh, Euclid is a great town. It's it was kind of a booming suburb back at that time in the mid '50s, but and it grew and it grew and it grew. But you just, it was a typical suburban city as we went. Like I said, we moved from the heart of the city when I was 5. It was typical Italian family. My aunt lived below us. My grandparents lived behind us. My great-grandparents lived 2 doors down. Everybody was in the same neighborhood. My grandfather was a barber down in the city. So it was pretty typical Italian family growing up.
And how did that change a little bit when you moved to the suburbs? Were your other relatives around there too?
Yeah, that kind of changed. We all kind of, my aunt had moved out on the west side, and my grandparents moved kind of with us. They moved 2 doors down. I always knew my grandparents were going to. They moved 2 doors down. After a while, they lived in South Euclid for a while after they moved from the city. So we all kind of migrated out, and in the end, my mom's parents lived 2 doors down from us, and so we still were kind of in the same neighborhood.
How would you describe your parents' relationship and their relationship with you?
They were the best. Everything that my parents did was about family, and like I said, my dad would he would drive me down to my basketball games in the city, and it was he and I a lot of times in the car because, like I said, I went to school. It was probably 20 miles from my house. So my dad and I spent a lot of time. Back then, I didn't really even start driving until I was senior in high school. And so it was, you only had one car, and so you made it do. And again, so my brothers and my sister would. We would all kind of share a ride whenever we could. And like I said, my mom, I don't even think she even learned how to drive until my youngest brother, Joe, was born. So, it was just, again, times have changed a lot.
No doubt about that. You went to an all-boys high school, but what was the social life like for you as a teenager?
Oh, social life was great. And, I've always, I couldn't have asked for a better education, and how I ended up at Rockhurst was after I got married and we moved to Kansas City, and we came by Rockhurst, and I told my wife, I said, if we ever have sons, that's where they're going to school. She said, oh, really, going to an all-boys school? I said, yeah. I said, I'll tell you what, your social life is great, and now is, like I always used to tell kids, if you can't get a date going to Rockhurst High School, it doesn't matter where you're going to go to school. But and that's kind of how it was with my high school. We had a couple all-girls schools that were not close by, but close enough. In fact, they tore Latin down, I think, in 1977, and they moved it out east, and now it's called Cathedral Latin, Notre Dame Cathedral Latin, and they combined with a girls' school. It's like kind of like a lot of the all-boys schools did back there when they couldn't survive, just with one sex. But no, my parents were the best. They, again, it was family was number one, and actually when I went to college out here at Kansas State, I was the first one to kind of leave the neighborhood, to leave the family, and the first one to go to college, and that was fairly tough on my dad, but it all worked out.
So you're getting towards the end of your high school years, and you realize that football is going to be the thing. How did you happen to get recruited and eventually end up at Kansas State?
Well, I had about 4 or 5 offers, and I visited Rutgers, and then Don Lawrence really was the guy I always considered. Don, he had coached for the Chiefs and coached in the NFL for a long time, and he went to Latin, and I always credit Don with kind of getting me out here and changing the course of my life. And he was coaching at Kansas State at the time and recruiting in Cleveland, and saw me on the basketball court. To be honest with you, he always told people, he said I recruited him off the basketball floor. And when I came to visit Kansas State, it was my first time I was ever even on an airplane. And I remember flying into Kansas City, and then taking a puddle jumper at that time from Kansas City to Lawrence to Topeka to Manhattan, and I wondered, where am I going? And it was a real cultural shock for a kid from Cleveland. But having been at Rutgers the week before in New York, and then going to Manhattan and walking down the street and people saying hello to you, and then the most friendly people I ever met, it's East Coast and Midwest are totally different areas when it comes to being social. And when I got home, I told my folks, I said, I'm going to Kansas State. They said they were the friendliest people I ever met. Yeah, they didn't care where I was from, and you could walk down the street and people look you in the eye and said hello, and you're not used to that growing up where I grew up.
That is absolutely correct. I had never left New England until I went to the University of Kansas, and I remember getting on the elevators and young ladies would say hello and start talking with you to you, and I'm like, "Wow, I'm scoring here." And of course, I was not. These people were just being friendly, but it's a completely different deal.
It's completely different. That's what I try to tell people. Like I said, I'd been in New York the week before Rutgers. We went to the city, and growing up in Cleveland. Cleveland's kind of I always tell people, Cleveland is an Eastern Midwest city. It's got more Eastern culture right there on the border of being an Eastern city. And when you walk down the street, you don't look at people, you don't say hello, you just keep walking.
Right.
And when I got in Manhattan, Kansas, I'm going, wow, where am I?
Now, from a football standpoint, what was the change for you, adapting to college football?
Well, I loved it. And then basically, it's like, and you can talk to any of the guys who ever played. It's more about the relationships than it is about the game. I remember games and the good games you played, the bad games you played, the good times you had, the bad times you had, but the characters that you're around every day and from all over the country. And when I got there, that was you still had freshman football. We played a 4-game freshman season. And again, I made a big transition in football from being recruited in high school as a quarterback, finished my career as a tight end, go to Kansas State, and I'm playing tight end, and then I moved to defensive end. Then my sophomore year, I'm playing defensive tackle. So, I always tell people that I ran myself closer to the ball. And as I got bigger and put on weight and strength was always my forte. So then, we changed coaches between my freshman year, right after my freshman year, and Vince Gibson came in and really changed everything at Kansas State for a while. And it was a rude awakening for a lot of guys. I remember there were 52 of us on scholarship. And back then, guys were walking away in that spring in the middle of the night. But that was during the Vietnam War.
Right.
And if you dropped out of college, you were going to the Army. You were flat going. You were getting drafted as soon as you dropped out. So your best bet was to stay in college and then kind of wait to see what happened when you graduated.
Right, absolutely. Now, to that point, you mentioned Vince Gibson and we gonna win and all that, and he came aboard and changed the fortunes. K-State football wasn't exactly storied, but you went there liking the community. What were your expectations from a football standpoint, and how did they improve once you got there?
Well, I knew when I went to I'm gonna get to play in the Big Eight, and the whole culture changed when he got there. It was totally different. Like I said, we had back then there was not too many scholarship limits, and I think we had 52 guys playing freshman football. We ended up being the best freshman team that Kansas State ever had. But by the time I graduated, only 8 of us finished.
Wow.
Out of the 52, because what Vince Gibson put us through, it was hell. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I'm thinking, because, he was trying to change everything at that time, and he recruited Len Dickey, and we had quite a good ball club with
Yep.
We probably had 6 or 7 guys who went on to the pros, from that point with Matt Caron, Len Dickey, Larry Brown. I could go on and on and on. And at one time, my junior year, we were 5-1, just beat Oklahoma bad and ranked 10th in the country. And you'd have thought, Kansas State turned the corner. And then I graduated in 1970. And then they had one more good year, and then after that, it was downhill for a long time.
Yes, indeed, it was. So you're at Kansas State. You're playing football, playing with good players on a good team. What was your life like away from football?
Oh, you know what? We had a good time. Obviously, we look back, and a bunch of us guys every once in a while still get together, and in fact, we're trying to put together a reunion of the freshman, our freshman class who finished. It was so different. Kids today, you're scrutinized with cell phones. I mean, you can't, if we had done the things today that we did back then, we'd probably all be in jail. With cell phones, you can't do anything, but it was never, it was just ornery stuff. It was
right.
What college kids used to do. Today, when you see it with guns and you see all the stuff going on, and, it is pretty simple stuff. People ask me how I met my wife, and we were a bunch of football players. We went and serenaded at a sorority, and we went out after that, and that's how my wife said, how'd you meet him? Said, I was dancing on a table. And she said I looked interesting. So today you do that stuff, and it was harmless stuff.
Right. Was this a love at first sight type of thing, or did it take a while for you to woo Marilyn?
It didn't take a long time. We hit it off, and then we were, then I went home for the summer because I was back then. She lived here in Kansas City, and but back then you had to go home and work. I worked on the loading docks for 2 summers back in Cleveland with the trucks, and you had to get a summer job. Today they keep the kids there year round. You don't go home. You're there all summer and going to summer school, and so we would be apart for a summer and writing letters, and then came back and got married a year after that, and I still had a year to go. And she had graduated and was working on campus, and we lived in what we call married housing, and I was still playing football. And but it's funny today. It was pretty simple living, pretty simple life.
About what point when you were playing football did you think that you might want to coach football?
Well, I think I always wanted to. Once I was playing, I was kind of a fairly, I was a leader. I remember when Vince Gibson got there, they had an election of captains, and I'm a freshman, and he brought me in his office. And he said, Tony, you got 10 votes to be captain of this football team. I hadn't even played it down yet. So, I was always interested in it. Like I said, growing up in Cleveland with Jim Brown, and I used to sit in my room and listen on the radio and listen to the Cleveland Browns. I was a huge Browns fan. I tell people today I said I'm a Chiefs fan and a Royals fan, an Indians fan, and a Browns fan. And I said up until the Chiefs won, and the Browns have just made me suffer. And the Royals won, and the Indians have been pretty good for a while, but the Browns have made you suffer. No, I kind of knew, and so when we got married, I the day I graduated, I got my draft notice, I was sitting in a barber shop back when I had hair on a Saturday in Manhattan, and the draft lottery had just come out.
Right.
And I picked up the paper, and I'm checking my birthday. I'm going down. I'm feeling pretty good. I hit number 72, and there I was.
Ooh.
So, and they said if you were 99, you were going under 99.
Wow.
So the day I graduated, and I had a teaching and coaching job in Cleveland already lined up at John F. Kennedy High School. And so the day I graduated, I got my draft notice. And so we went back, and I knew I was going, and we were going to live back there because I had a job back there. And we go back, and I go to my physical. Well, you know, and God must have had a way. I think I was getting a deferment because I was teaching in the inner city in Cleveland anyway. But I went up my junior year in spring ball. I had made a tackle, and my back was bothering me, and something went right. And they said, you need to go to Student Health and get some X-rays. So I go get some X-rays. And the doc come out and he said, well, you got a vertebrae that's not quite formed. The muscle got caught in there when you hit. And he said, probably it'll never happen again. But he said, if you take these X-rays and this letter, it'll probably get you a deferment. I go, you're kidding me. He goes, no. So I go through the physical. Now, I'm 6'2". At that time, I'm 237. And it's, at that time, that's a fairly big guy.
Right.
And I'm bench pressing over 400 pounds. I'm walking in. I'm in my skivvies. I go through the whole physical, and obviously I pass everything. And I get to the end, and the guy goes, do you have any reason we shouldn't take him? And I was going to go. I didn't have a problem. My dad served. My uncle served. You know, I'm a patriot. I love the military and the Army. I've coached in 3 All-American games for the Army and a Marine game, and so I know I was going to go. I didn't have a problem with that. And they said, do you have anything that would keep you from going? And I said, well, only this letter and these X-rays from the doctor. And the guy looks at it and he goes, 1Y, which meant only in national emergency will we take you. And so when they stamped it 1Y, this guy is standing behind me. Now you got to remember, I'm a weightlifter, and the guy looks at this guy and he goes, you're not taking this guy? Look at this guy. You know, he went nuts.
Wow.
He goes, look at him. And I got home and I said, they told me I'd only go into national emergency. And so that's how my life turned around.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com and let Chad help you.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. Whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
Let's spend a minute with Dr. Brad Woodle, who, along with his wife, Dr. Christina Woodle, the owners of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture, my home for chiropractic care. And first of all, just tell us about the wide range of services you offer.
Danny, we offer comprehensive chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapy, and rehab. We do a very thorough examination, x-rays on site as necessary, and we have a full rehabilitation department, so we can help out with exercises, stretches, different therapies for the complex, but also the very simple conditions we treat.
You have been deemed essential and have remained open all through this COVID-19 process. What are some of the things you've done to make sure that was the case?
From the very beginning, in March, we started to make sure that we were cleaning and sanitizing with EPA-registered sanitizing products. We also implemented masks way before the state required them. We implemented a parking lot waiting room, took out half of the chairs in our waiting room, and made sure to space out visits so we could appropriately meet, discuss, and also screen patients to make sure we were taking care of healthy people.
Find out more about Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture and how they can help you at asfca.com. Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from wreckexpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit wreckexpert.com and learn more. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Our guest is Tony Severino, longtime coach at various stops, but mostly at Rockhurst High School, and of course, many, many state championships and many fewer losses than that. So you're about 1/10 state titles to losses, actually, about that ratio. But our guest, so you're headed back to Cleveland. You're going to go back to your home area and teach, but your wife had other ideas, huh?
Well, I always tell people, she got a good job back there, and I'm coaching at John F. Kennedy High School, and I'm a JV coach, and I'm working with the defensive line, and we had a pretty good football team. John F. Kennedy was a heck of a school, but and people always ask me, well, but she never could go to a game. We were down in the inner city. In fact, I think the only game she went to, we were playing the number one team in Pennsylvania, where a guy named Joe Moore was the head coach, who turned out to be the longtime offensive line coach at Notre Dame for years. Joe was the head coach there. And that's the only game my wife ever got to go to because where we had played, and it really wasn't safe back in those days. There was a lot of rioting and stuff going on from about 68 to about 71, somewhere in there. Cleveland, when the lake was on fire, Lake Erie was on fire, the Cuyahoga River, But I never thought, that's where I grew up. But, so she said, I always tell people she cried for 13 months, 10 days, 5 hours, 6 minutes, but who's counting? But I told her, I said, you know what? If I get a job back in Kansas City, I'll go back to Kansas City. I love Kansas City. I love the people. I knew that wasn't, being the oldest son in an Italian family, nobody left.
Right.
And, and that was really hard on my dad, my mom, but, I told him, I said, look, I'm going to make you proud, and we'll get back and we'll visit. And, and it was a good thing my brother had left eventually. And, but the point being, I told my wife, I said, I love Kansas City. I love the people back there. Most friendly place, great town. And, it's, I want people finding out how good this city is, in essence, compared to a lot of cities. And so when we came back, and I interviewed at about 4 or 5 different places. And luckily, the timing, I hit at Shawnee Mission West and talked to Dick Purdy, and again, another guy that changed the course of my life, and Reese Pollard, guys who took a chance on Tony Severino. And here I am, a kid from Cleveland. I was different. I talked a little bit different than the people out here, and at that time it was just different. And they took a chance on me, and that's how it all started. But I remember driving down State Line and going by Rockhurst and seeing all boys Jesuit school. And that's, like I said, when I didn't know anything about it. And I told my wife, if we have sons, I want them to go to school there. They're going to go to school there. And so I coached for Dick for 6 years and became the head baseball coach there, started the baseball program, turned down a job at Baker in between, and I had a couple other interviews, but then the Northwest job opened up, and I took that job and coached football and baseball. But then I called Al Davis at Rockhurst to schedule a game as soon as I took over that job at Northwest. And I don't think Al ever forgot that, because I said, Coach, I want to build this program up, be as good as Rockhurst. And I want to play you whenever you get an opening. I never shied away from anybody. And that's how it all began. And then in 1981, we won the state championship at Northwest, and we're there for 3 years in a row in the state finals. And Jerry Culver, I say he resigns. And I'll never forget, Harold Wamscon's calling me at 7:30 in the morning. And he said, Tony, you're going to apply for that job, aren't you? I go, if they want me, I'm going. And I called Al Davis that day. And I said, Coach, he said, Tony, I've been waiting on your call. I said, Coach, I just saw in the paper this morning. And he said, be over here at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I'm going to tell you my interview. He said, you be over here at 3:30 in the afternoon, and Mike Van Kiersblik meets me at the door. I always tell Mike he's the first guy I ever met at Rockhurst. He takes me to Coach Davis's office. Coach Davis grabs my arm, takes me up to Father Hunhausen, walks me in the office, and he said, Father, this is our new football coach. Do whatever you have to do to hire him. And he leaves. How many people get interviewed like that anymore?
Not many.
That was, every now you got to go in front of boards. You got to go, you got to go through hoops, and they check in your. But that literally was my interview with Al. Like I said, I had played against Rockhurst, and he knew me and knew my background. But that was he just grabbed my arm. We didn't even talk for 10 minutes. I said, Coach, there's about 3 things I'd like to have before I come over here. But you had to know Al Davis. You didn't. Not too many people were able to say no to Al.
So you had success early, and you won a state championship already as you're going to Rockhurst. How did you develop what would be your football philosophy?
Well, a lot of it has to do with you take the best and the worst of all the coaches you played for, all the people you've met, all the people you listen to, and then as you play them, you take philosophies. Yeah, I really like that scheme. I like what he did there, and Vince Gibson was a great organizer. I didn't think he was the greatest everyday coach. Game coach. Certain guys are great game coaches. Certain guys are great practice coaches. Certain guys are great organizers. I read a lot of books. The guys, John Wooden, I admired the things he had to say about coaching. Mike Krzyzewski, you listen to me talk about basketball coaches. I read tons of, Lou Holtz, different books and people you've met. I tell people, the people that I have been so fortunate to have in my office, the Lou Holtz and the Barry Switzers and the Joe Paternos and you name them. And I think one of the greatest was that I got to drive with John Wooden, sit in the back seat of a limo. I was supposed to pick him up at the airport. He was going to talk at a clinic here, and I missed him coming. He didn't. He got off the plane early, and we ended up the limo driver. I had the driver. We got off at the same time he did at the hotel, and I went up to him and said, Coach Wooden, I am so sorry. I said, you got off early, and so I was part of a speech that night. Well, the great thing was about a year later, I'm speaking at a clinic in St. Louis, and John Wooden's on the clinic because he's the main speaker. I'm supposed to speak at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. John was the keynote guy at 9. His secretary calls me up in my hotel room, and he said, Coach Wood like to trade spots with you because he's got to get back on a plane and get back to UCLA, to get back to California. And I go, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people when Tony Severino walks in and John Wood's not there. Well, John, I said, I'll be honored, but, so I mean, so I take it, I walk out there, there's like 500 people. I think John talked about 9 who were there to hear me.
That's funny. But you had consistent success. You had one losing team at Rockhurst, and also your championship teams were kind of spaced out as well. So you were always excelling. As you went along, did you find it difficult to, you set a standard like that? I mean, that's difficult to live up to.
Well, my philosophy had always been you play the best. I think one year we traveled over 4 or 5 times. We played out in Vegas. We went to Chicago. We went to, I started naming all the different places that the teams we played, and I always looked to play the best. And I always used to tell the kids, if you don't play the best, you're never going to be. I said, don't get me wrong. I said, there's probably 5 or 6 schools like Rockhurst in the state of Missouri and around Kansas City. I said, this is a big country, and there's a lot of great football players, a lot of great programs around the country, and who are you going to compare yourself to? And you would have kids, well, Coach, I think I could get to college. No, look, and I can recruit a 6'2". I was always honest with the kids, but I said, doesn't mean you can't play against them. Doesn't mean you can't compete with them. So we always looked to play the best, and I always thought it really paid dividends when we got into playoff time.
Did you feel like you almost had to do that? Because you, during the course of a season, would have quite a few pretty easy goes of it in games.
Well, you had to do it as we really got good, and things changed probably around the mid-'80s, and people just wouldn't play it. We were always an independent, so we weren't in a league. Right. And Rockhurst isn't in a league, so you got to go out hunting games. Like I said, I talk to Kelly Donahoe probably once or twice a week, and he's finding that out. If you got, we were lucky enough to get Blue Springs and Blue Springs South on a regular schedule, but there were times they were only in-town games, Right. And then as those schools started getting better, and they would find out, look, if you don't, eventually, if you're going to get in the playoffs, you're going to have to play a team like Rockhurst. So then they start scheduling us, and everybody's program. Kansas City football is really getting pretty good. I'm telling you that right now. There's a lot of good players and a lot of good kids and a lot of excellent coaches on both sides of the state. And you'd like to think, as they were going, I know Tom Cruise over at Raymond Peculiar said the same thing, and he started to schedule us. And they all started to use that philosophy that I had for the day I took over coaching. That if you want to be the best, you got to compete against the best. and play at a high level, you know, and kids understand that then. Then they practice at a high level. They prepare, you know, in the off season at a high level. They know what they're facing, you know. So it was always I've never shied away. I mean, we went down to played in Louisiana, and then we played the next week in Dallas, and it was, I don't know if I could do it today at my age, but back then, being 10, 12 hours on a bus, getting off and playing a game. And, you know, we very seldom stayed overnight.
Wow. Did you, how much through the years did it bother you, if any, that the perception was out there that Rockhurst had advantages, that they quote unquote recruited, things like that? I mean, it was a sort of a standard issue type of thing that people would say. Did that bother you?
Well, here's what I always tell people, and I go, you can ask anybody this. In all my years, I never have talked to a kid in playing football. I never recruited a kid in my life. Every once in a while, you might have a kid in your hallway that you looked at, and somebody. I literally had parents would say, "Hey, I'd really like to talk to my son about playing football." And now, you know, I would get letters and emails. You need to come and watch my son play. And I go, I don't do that. So they want to go to school at Rockhurst. They have to take the entrance exam. They have to recruit. Now, I always made a joke about it. But I swear, you know, and I tell people, you will never find anybody that will ever tell you that I asked them to play football, to come to Rockhurst and play football. We never did. I never did. I never would. And obviously I never will anymore. But even in the school. In fact, there were times even my sons would say, "Dad, you know, all these schools are out recruiting these guys." And look, if they want to come and play, they'll be here. You know, I always had a little youth football camp in the summer, and kids would come. And I remember when Nathan Shieldhouse came, these kids are coming there 8, 9 years old, and his mom would tell the story. He said that Coach Severino talked to you about coming to Rockhurst. And he said that the last day in his 8th grade year, he'd say, "No, he never mentioned me coming here at all." And, you know, the school sells itself. The education sells itself. I always tell people, if I've got to talk a kid into playing, eventually I'm going to have to pay him to play, you know, and it's, I just never believed in that. I always used to make a joke when I talk at clinics, because you're right. The perception was, yeah, we recruited these kids. And I always tell people, there is not one kid that will ever tell you that I talked to them into coming to Rockhurst to play football. Never. And I remember, but I'd always, when I talked to clinics, and I said, I know the perception is I recruit. But, you know, I don't recruit. So they have to take an entrance exam. I said, no, I do have a cardboard cutout at the door. And it says, if you are taller than this cutout, turn and take the test to the left. If you're not, take the test to the right. And I go, if you can get down to the test on the right under 5 seconds, turn back around and take the test to the left. So, and they would all look around going, I knew it. I said, guys, it's just a joke.
Right. Absolutely. One of your goals through the years when you talked about it was having, if you had sons, that they would go to Rockhurst. And I think in some of the stuff I've read, part of the reason that you turned away opportunities potentially to leave Rockhurst is because you wanted to coach your sons. Would you say you ever came close to leaving Rockhurst and taking one of those opportunities?
Well, the closest, you know, I had about 4 or 5 college offers. And I remember in 1984, yeah, I mean, I had, you know, a couple of them even before then, but in 1984, Mike Gottfried called me and said, Tony, I got a defensive line job for you, and I'd like to have you come to Kansas and coach. And you and your wife. So my wife and I drove up there, and our kids were very young. I think my oldest was 7. No, my oldest was 11, and I had a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it was in 1984. And I'll never forget this. And we drive up there, and they offered me the job. I'm sitting in Mike's house. We went out to dinner, came over with my wife. They were talking, met all the coaches. And I said, you don't really have anything else to prove. You won state championships at 2 different schools, baseball state championship. You know what? He said, you'll be a head college coach in 3 years. And they make me an offer. And it was for about $10,000. At that time, college coaches weren't getting paid like they are today. I don't know if I could turn down what they're getting paid today, but we're driving back from Lawrence. I'll never forget this. And my wife says, what are you going to do? What do you want to do? And I said, Mayor, and in your life sometimes you have to make professional decisions and you have to make personal decisions. I said, I've always had a personal decisions, and I wanted my sons to go to Rockhurst and have a chance to see them grow up and be with them. And I don't think I can do that as a college football coach. And I listened to all these guys who never got to see their sons play because they're coaching college or the pros. And I said, I'm staying at Rockhurst. And I remember Al Davis, when I got back there, and the next day, he said, what are you going to do? I said, Coach, I'm staying. He said, I think you're crazy. He said, you realize, I said, Coach, there are things that are very important to me. When I'm about ninth, when Bill Snyder got out at Kansas State, and now I already forgot the guy who took his place, he calls me. And this was after my sons had graduated. And he said, Tony, President Weefall says we got to get you up here no matter what it takes. He's driving to my house in a snowstorm. He's down in my basement right here in this house I'm in right now. He said, I'm coming in to see you, and they make me this offer. And I Ron Prince. I go, Ron, I said, how long do you think you're going to be there? He said, well, I plan on, he said, I'm building a house. He told me all this stuff. He said, I'll get back with you in the spring. I want you to think about it, but we want you up at K-State. And when it was all over, I told Ron the same thing. I told my wife, I said, I got a pretty good job. I got a great life. I got the best job in Kansas City. Our kids are all graduated. We're someday, like right now, I got 10 grandkids and 11th one on the way. And they're all here. In fact, my wife's talking to one of them on the phone right now. I go, I'm good, Ron. And he came back, and I said, I don't think I can take it. So, yeah, sometimes you got to make those choices in life.
Now, that one was probably a little bit more difficult because, as you said, your kids had graduated, and also by that point in time, it probably was more significant money, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was getting there. They were starting to make those moves at that time, but then again, at that time, it wasn't about the money,
right?
But like I said, today as an assistant, and I talked to these guys. I remember Al Saunders when he was with the Chiefs, and I had two of Al's sons at Rockhurst.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when one of his sons was graduating, and Al was standing outside the auditorium, and I'm walking through, and Al and I are talking. I knew Al, and he said, "Tony, you are so lucky." He said, "I didn't get to hardly ever see my kids play." And I said, Al, that's one of those things. You were making $2 million a year. I'm not, but I did get to see mine play.
What you're obviously proud of the relationship you've made through the years. You've always talked about that, and earlier you talked about Vince Gibson and the fact that he really drove the players hard, and he wouldn't wish that on anybody. Did that type of thing impact you? You were kind of famous for not overburdening your assistant coaches, not having Sunday meetings, and you said if you ever forgot what it was like to be a player, then you'd get out of it. Did you want to maybe, because you had maybe a semi-miserable experience in that regard, did you want to make football a little bit more fun?
Yeah, I always told my coaches, families first. And I always, when we'd have the coaches and their wives, and and I always tell them, I always tell the coach, look, all I need you is 2.5, 3 hours a day. I don't want football to consume your life, because when it's all said and done, football will end, and the kids that you coach will leave, and they'll come back and see you and stuff. But I never had Sunday night meetings. I would have Sunday meetings. We would meet on Saturdays only up until about the fourth game in September. And then the kids, I always tell the kids, your Saturdays are yours. Unless you're injured, you come in for treatment. I never had a full staff meeting, but once a year at the beginning of the year, I laid it out. And I was very fortunate that most of my coaches, almost all my coaches for a lot of years, were in the building. So if I needed to talk to them, I would just call them down to my office.
Right.
Or we would meet before school, or we would meet over lunch, where it wasn't interfering with their family time. I go, and whatever family time comes up, that's number one. If you got to go somewhere, I want you to watch your kids grow up. So I was always big on that, because I always felt like that was just something. And again, times have changed enough. Back when I first started, you had 8mm film. Then you had 16. And you'd all have to meet, because you only had one reel.
Right.
And you'd all have to get together on certain times. But then as technology came around, I'm watching Rockers on my phone now.
Right.
As technology came around, and all I used to tell my guys is, look, you make sure I want your grades in on Monday. You make sure that you watch the tape. I want to see their grades. I want to see what you think. Because, my wife knew that Sunday nights were mine, that I would probably go down to my office at 6 or 7 o'clock, and I'd be down there till 1 in the morning, but it was just me. And I wouldn't ask my assistants to do that, but that was I felt part of my job, So, I always wanted my coaches to have, I always figured a guy coming from a happy home, and if he leaves his wife and she's happy, he's going to be happy. And if he's happy, I'm going to be happy. So, and then if he's happy, the kids are probably going to be happy, because you don't want a coach being miserable at home and coaching you.
Absolutely right. And now you've been happy for over 50 years with Maryland. That's quite a ride.
Yeah, 50 years, 51 now.
Yep.
And, if once I get my foot out of this cast and get through my Achilles stuff and get through this pandemic, and everything going on, people are saying, boy, you took a great time to retire. I go, schools have changed and what you got to go through, but we're going to get back. I pray we're going to get back.
By the way, speaking of getting out of, you've had some problems with your legs, Achilles and such, and like you said, you'll be back and ready to roll soon. But Euclid, Ohio has the Polka Hall of Fame. Do you fancy yourself a polka man?
Well, here we go. All right, this is the other great story. I know where you're leading to this. I played the accordion. Like I said, my grandparents were from Italy, both sets of my grandparents, and one of my mom's fathers, my grandpa Foliano, he always had dreamed about me playing in a polka band. And when I was 7 years old, they wanted me to play the accordion. I took lessons for 3 years playing the accordion, and the best thing I ever learned was 3 Blind Mice. I was terrible. Because Frankie Yankovic Steakhouse was right down in Cleveland. Boy, you have done your research.
Yes.
But yeah. But so the funny thing is that when we had kids, and we always want to playing an instrument is great. I wish today I could sit down at a piano and play a tune, and just I think it's great. I admire musicians and people who can play instruments and do that. And the funny thing was, years later, when our kids and my parents called and said, "Look, we got your accordion here from when you were a kid, and we're going to bring it out to you," when they came to visit. And it was like brand new, and on the it was like in these little had Tony on it. And so I go to trade it in because we wanted to get a piano for our kids. And so I thought, well, maybe I can get some money for this accordion. And I'll never forget going over to Midcast South. I think it was Myers Music at the time over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, what? I want to trade this accordion and I want to buy a piano. And I hear the guy on the phone, what can I get for a... Now, this accordion, you're thinking this is 1950, probably 1956 when I started taking lessons. So this is not a young accordion, but it looked like it was brand new because I was terrible. So I barely used it. So I called my wife. And I said, well, I'm on my way home. What do you think I got for the accordion? She goes, oh, probably $50, $75. I go, $350 toward this piano.
Wow.
I go, it was well worth it. It was like it was an antique that was barely used.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's something else you and I have in common, because when I was young, and I'm a little bit younger than you, for whatever reason, if you started music lessons, they put you on the accordion, I guess, to learn chords or something like that. And after about 5 lessons on the accordions, the lady called my mother in after a session and said to her, "Mrs. Clinkscale, I advise you to stop wasting your money. Your son has absolutely no talent on the accordion."
That is awesome. That's awesome. That sounds like me. I was so bad. I'll never forget. I can't remember the song I had. Oh, Ave Maria.
Right,
on the accordion. I had to write out each note. I was so bad because I couldn't play it. And the guy made me write out note 5 times. I'll never forget it. Yeah. I'm going, what am I doing?
But the fact that you were so bad helped you buy a piano, right, later on. So
there you go. Yeah.
That's pretty darn good. Well, Tony, you obviously now are in retirement, and you haven't quite been able to enjoy your retirement yet. But what do you're inducted into 5 different halls of fame, and what do you feel like your legacy is, and what are you most proud of in your career?
I think I'm most proud of just the kids who come back and say, "Coach, I enjoy playing for you." That when they named the stadium at the field after me. Last year on my last home game, and saw that, and all these young men that I had over the years, probably 200-300 of them had come back to see me, and I just not everybody's gonna like you. I mean, I got kids, when you're dealing with people, you could be the greatest for 300 people, and 10 people, they're not going to think you're very good, because and I always used to tell people, it's only because if the only reason you don't like me is because you weren't playing, that's okay, And I always tell people that one of the great compliments I ever have is said, I got a 4th team tight end who's having fun. And he said, I don't know how you do it. And I just wanted people to say, hey, you were fair, and he was fair, and he treated people right. Every once in a while, I would go off, and the kids will always remember those times. And I always used to tell coaches, when I give clinics, you can yell and scream at kids all day long. Eventually, they will turn you off. If you really want to make an impact, treat them fairly, treat them right, and then when you get mad at them, it will make an impression on them because they'll know you're upset. Literally, I would have kids saying, "Coach, I came out of the locker room one time and I had a stocking cap on. It was cold, and at halftime I put my ball cap on because I was getting warm. And I'll never forget my starting center was walking next to me and said, "Coach, I'm glad you put your baseball cap back on." I go, "What?" He goes, We never could tell if you're mad at us when you got the stocking cap on. But when you got the baseball cap on and that hand goes up there and takes the cap off, we know you're upset. And the little things kids pick up on, but they always, I just want them to know that, nothing was ever personal. No matter what it did, it was just I always tell people, I'm not going to treat you all the same, but I'm going to treat you fairly.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.